So welcome everyone to today's P&R committee. This meeting will be webcast and the record retained on the council website for up to 2 years. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting for your name, the content of what you say and your image to be broadcast and stored to the council website. If any member, officer or member of the public addressing the committee has concerns with this, please contact the committee services officer immediately. For those at home viewing the webcast, I'd like to inform you that if you look above the video, you'll see a resources tab. Select this and a link to the agenda will appear in the right-hand side. This will allow you to open the agenda in PDF form and follow the discussion and debate. Thank you. Apologies received. I have Councillor Clements and Councillor Jordan is deputising, Councillor McManus and Councillor Green is deputising, and Councillor Gilchrist, Councillor Karubi is deputising. Thank you. Members' Code of Conduct. So anyone here has to consider whether you have any disclosable pecuniary interest and or any other relevant interest in connection with any items on the agenda. If you do, can you declare them now and the nature of the interest, please? Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, agenda items 11 and 15, prejudicial interest, and I should be leaving the chamber while it's discussed.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, it's a bit of advice, really, if I may, Jeanette. On item, what is it now? I think it's 16, the Hoylake Golf Resort. I think I was mentioning the letter, wasn't I, that was sent to originally to the council because of my role as constituency committee chairman. Does that mean I will have I have to advise on whether I should withdraw or not, Chair?
No, I don't consider so, Councillor Green. And of course, you weren't the only person mentioned in that letter, so we'll get to that later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We can move on. So the minutes of the last committee, can I have someone to move the accuracy of them? Well, I'll move them. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Nolan. Can we approve those minutes? By assent? Thank you. Agenda item 5 is public and member questions. I've not received any public questions, not received any statements and petitions, and not received any questions by members. So we can move on to the next agenda item, which is 6, and that's the Wirral plan. And I'm going to invite Carly Brown to present the report. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. The purpose of the Wirral Plan 2021-26 is to provide the long-term ambition, aspiration and vision for the borough, and also sets out how we will work together as a local authority, but also with our partners to achieve those priorities. It is a strategic framework that binds together a range of priorities, strategies and programmes of work to provide a coherent narrative on how services will be delivered for our residents and communities. There are three recommendations that P&R are asked to support this evening. These are: number 1, consider the contents of the Wirral Plan as set out in Appendix 1 to this report and refer to full council in September. Recommendation 2, agree that further engagement and discussion with relevant committees takes place to shape the underpin and delivery plans and work programme required to implement the Wirral Plan. And finally, number 3, approve the approach for the development of delivery, planning and corporate change programme to support the implementation. If we could take you to section 3 of the report, there are a couple of key points I'd like to bring to the attention of councillors this evening. Section 3 of the report provides the background, context, information how we've produced the plan and the vision and priorities as outlined in section 3.5 and 3.6. In 3.9 of the report, it emphasises the need for such coherence and the importance of collaborative work, and particularly some of our major programmes of work, such as the local plan, medium-term financial plan, our key role in the emergent health reforms, and also about how we address demand and prevention in the borough. Section 3.10 of the report also provides an outline how these priorities can be delivered, and this is important that it is done with P&R and the service committees. To do so, it is proposed that a discussion of the draft delivery plans takes place at the P&R agenda plan session on the 20th of August, followed by a more detailed P&R workshop to take place in September. This will ensure that members can input into shaping the underpinning delivery plans, ensure they align with the emerging committee work programmes, and consider how they wish progress to be reported on a regular basis. Members will also be aware that each of the policy and service committees are currently holding budget workshops to consider the proposals in the delivery plans with a financial impact on the 2022-2023 budget. The progress of these workshops can be updated at the planning session and will form the basis of the corporate change programme. Finally, section 3.11 of the report ensures that this work is fully aligned with the MTFP, our medium-term financial plan, and the requirements from MHCLG with regard to the exceptional financial support request. And also that the details of the proposed change programme structure and governance will be confirmed following the approval of the plan, associated delivery plans and engagement with P&R committee. The remainder of the report is fairly self-explanatory, Chair, so I'm happy to pause there and take any questions.
Councillor Gray.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate the people involved in producing this. It's a very promising piece of work. And just to be clear that it is obviously an ongoing piece of work, and I look forward to fine-tuning it. I'm just a little bit concerned at some of the changes with regard to environment and transport and the key thematic priorities, and I do look forward to clarifying those concerns and working with my committee and officers, particularly around the themes of biodiversity and active travel, because they were critical in the original plan, and post-COVID they're even more critical. So I do look forward to being part of that and having those discussions in full, and I think it's a very promising piece of work, so thank you. Thanks for that.
Thanks for that. I don't see anyone else's hands up, so thank you for all your work on this, Carly. Okay. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Sorry, we won't. Not yet. I'm going to move that we accept the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nolan. Can we agree by assent, everyone? Thank you. Okay, so we move on now to agenda item number 7, which is community bonds. And Chair, you're going to speak to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, this report has arisen as a result of a motion that was passed at full council on the 22nd of March this year, which asked the Policy and Resources Committee to do 3 things. These were to review the use of community interest bonds elsewhere within the country, to look at an assessment of their potential application to fund projects in Wirral, and also to outline the practical steps required to set up the community bonds in Wirral. So the report highlights several types of community bond that are already in use across the country, and these include things like donations and rewards-based crowdfunding, where funding is pledged into a project for no financial return. There is civic crowdfunding, which is generally used for community-based projects, again, no financial return. But it can be used in some areas to support some functions that the council would normally undertake itself, and this would be passed forward to the community to undertake. And there's also debt or loan-based crowdfunding, where the funding is provided as a loan and the funder receives interest and repayments, and those repayments are either over the term of the loan or actually when the end of the loan expires. Just one important thing to note when looking at debt or loan-based funding, crowdfunding, this can only apply to capital projects. So in this sense, we can't use the community-based community interest bonds for revenue funding or day-to-day projects, and that's as a result of the capital regulations that we have to adhere to. So the benefits, I suppose, of using this type of community investment for the funder is that they do gain a social benefit in investing in local projects, and it really encourages them and enhances their engagement with local government and local authorities. It does feel like they want to give something back to the community, and they do want to actively involve and engage with some of the projects that we've got on board. And I think it also raises awareness of local authority functions as well. A second advantage really is that it keeps the money within the borough, so that they are generally residents or businesses within the borough that would actually fund some of the council projects. And as a result, we would make a return, so we would pay interest to them. That would go back into their pockets. And in theory, that interest will then be re-spent within the borough, and so the wealth would be reinvested into the borough. And also, in some areas of the country, what we've found is that people investing in community interest bonds actually relinquish the requirement to have interest paid to them. So they will redonate that interest amount back to the local authorities. And that's a benefit for local authorities, because it means that we don't have to borrow the money and pay interest on the normal borrowing. So it can either be reinvested back into the council for, for further sort of community interest projects that we want to take, or additional income through to the council. There are some risks with looking at community interest bonds as well. Borrowing is really cheap for councils to borrow at the moment, and where we actually take up community interest bonds or community bonds, it would only work where the interest that we pay to the funder, the community, is actually equal to or less than what we would pay if we were borrowing it ourselves from the Public Works Loan Board or the PWLB. I suppose to mitigate this, if we wanted to do that, we could be explicit up front, and if we were asking for any engagement with community bonds, we could say to people who are potential funders that it would be a lower rate of interest than we would normally pay to our Public Works Loan Board, or it would be equal to that rate, so they would know from the off how much they were getting. However, the rate is often actually higher than what they would get if they were just keeping their money in a savings account, a general savings account anyway. So it would provide some benefit to them. Another risk is that there might not be enough funding raised for a project, and this could be result in a delay in that project going forward, or reputational issues to us. This means we would have to then go and borrow the money from elsewhere. Our normal source is PWLB funding. And it is a new concept for us as well. So we would need to take some time to invest in terms of administration and the procedures and processes to actually set the community bond or the community investment up. I suppose to mitigate this again, we could offer a large sort of marketing and communications campaign to try and engage a lot of people to make sure that we do get the amount of funding that we want to receive to fund some of the capital projects. We could set a target and have a bit of a hybrid approach to say we want a certain percentage invested through community bonds, and then we would borrow the rest of the money ourselves from the PWLB. And I suppose if we weren't seeing that we were going to hit the target early on, we could then make arrangements early on to make sure that ensure the project goes ahead, that we could actually borrow from PWLB instead. It may also exclude some residents from being able to invest due to the higher levels of deprivation in some areas of the borough than others. And again, to mitigate this, we could offer differing levels of investment for community bonds. So we could offer smaller levels and many, different types of bond, so that it would attract different, more people. However, I suppose with this, we would make sure that we don't need to overcomplicate the scheme and the system, and that it's not an administration-heavy scheme, and that we're spending sort of like a full-time post on actually administering the scheme, because it would be more costly for us then. And there are two examples that we've pulled out in the report where two other local authorities have used this type of investment, Warrington and West Berkshire. And these have both used them for solar energy. There are other smaller examples across the country of where other authorities have used it for smaller investments, but these two are by far the largest in how they've used community bonds so far. And in taking this forward, we have already, but we will contact them in more detail to do some best practice and lessons learned as to how their schemes have operated. And there's also potential that they may even share any due diligence or legal advice that they've received from those schemes when they actually first set them up. So I suppose a recommendation for this chair is for the committee to agree that we can develop some guidance on how a scheme would operate within Wirral, and once we've developed that guidance, it could be used as a source of funding to considered in any of the capital projects that we actually put forward. And as a result of that, the second recommendation is, if we do want to go forward with that, that we would amend our Treasury management strategy so that the community bonds are actually included as a source of funding for capital projects going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Anderson. You had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for that report, Chair. I've just got quite a few concerns on this, really. I do see the merits and the principles of it, but at a time when, as the authority, we're going through a capitalisation directive to put extra burdens on the small finance team with the systems that they're having to look at as well, to look outside of it. So just would like to ask if you've done any, the costs of it, what it will cost for us to set this scheme up, the merits in terms of offering a lower interest. We'd have to offer lower interest rates than we could borrow from. So, what would the uptake? And, I hear about marketing, communications, and at a time when we're still going through the pandemic and we're still going to have to use that team as well. It's a staff cost of that. So I'm just wondering if you could highlight those costs, please.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I don't think we haven't got the actual cost of doing that, because we're not sure as yet how much that will cost, depending on what schemes we might want to include it for. So it might not be appropriate for all schemes. And as part of the guidance, we'd have to have a look to see which schemes it would be appropriate for than others. What I would say is that we couldn't progress with it if there was a cost to the council. So the interest rates that we actually paid to the residents would either be equal to or less than the interest. Would be different than the interest rates that we would pay ourselves. So there will be a no net negative impact for us in actually going forward with it. In terms of the staff time, you're right. We've got quite a small staff team. It could be an administrative heavy scheme to start and to actually administer. What I would recommend, therefore, is that we perhaps do some more work on it, develop some guidance on it, have a look to see in West Berkshire and in Warrington how much time they spend themselves on their schemes. Maybe have a look at what schemes it would be appropriate for and what schemes it wouldn't, and put some criteria alongside those. And then maybe if we wanted to go ahead with it, we start from next financial year, the 1st of April, so that it doesn't impact on anything that we do in the teams for this year.
Chair, can I move following the recommendations, and that a further report is brought at the end of the year to consider this scheme once all those working throughs of the costs, the staff time have been assessed? Thank you.
Yep, certainly through you, Chair. Could definitely do that.
Sorry, Councillor Cleary, bring you in.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And thanks, Chair, for the report and for bringing it to the committee in a timely fashion following the unanimous approval of the original motion back in March. Just wanted to tease out a few points from within the report, and bearing in mind what we've just heard from Councillor Anderson as well. The report actually does say at the bottom of the summary that the social value attached to the bonds does not justify the extra costs. And I would just kind of take issue with that. I thought you gave a really fair and good summary of the benefits and the potential costs arising from community investment bonds. But I would take issue with that statement, because how do we measure the social value of a community investment bond? And if you look at the couple of examples that are kind of highlighted in the report, and particularly the one in Warrington, which I think we've tapped into personally, and that we will benefit from that going forward if we're able to secure our own energy supplies from renewable sources that Warrington have invested in through the bonds paid for by residents in Warrington. And I think there's a huge kind of reputational advantage to that, and I would imagine that an awful lot of people in Warrington feel very good about investing in something so positive in their own local area. And if we think about our community wealth building strategy and initiatives, what could be more community wealth building than raising funds from within the borough to fund really good projects within the borough, and that the money is then recycled within the borough. It's almost community wealth building. It's almost a definition of what community wealth building is. So that was the one little bit in the report I was disappointed in, because that is a bit subjective. We can measure financial costs, but social benefits and social value are a bit more subjective. And I think it's really important that when you consider the community investment bonds, that they are kind of attached to something really positive within the borough, as they've done, for example, in Warrington. So if we look, for example, at our own regeneration aspirations, we've put in a bid to the government for the town deal for the Birkenhead regeneration of over £40 million. We've got 25 million back, which is great, but it's obviously quite a significant shortfall in terms of what we want to achieve for that particular regeneration programme. And in particular, I'm thinking of the so-called Dock Branch Park initiative, which would transform Birkenhead. And I would imagine that people all over Wirral could get really motivated by something like that. And if we're not getting the funds that we need through the town deal programme, I think that has the real potential to be offered to the public of Wirral as something that could be potentially financed. And that additional finance could be absolutely crucial in actually making a project like that happen. And it could also be used to leverage additional funds from other sources, because it demonstrates our really positive aspirations, both in terms of community wealth building, our environmental and our social goals. So the potential social value from a really well-run community investment bond are very, very high indeed. So I think we need to bear that in mind. And in terms of the actual recommendations in the report, they're not actually committing us to anything significant. They're just adding this to our kind of arsenal of financial weaponry going forward in terms of raising funds. And again, if you think about how difficult it is, again, I go back to our town deal bid where we've got just over half of what we wanted, how hard it is and how hard officers have to work to generate funds. You know, Councillor Anderson spoke about the additional costs to us of running a scheme like this. But think about the additional costs every time we have to bid for the Future High Streets Fund, the Town Deal Fund, all the additional stuff that we have to bid for endlessly because of our top-down governance arrangements in this country. Those costs are very significant as well. And if this helps us to avoid some of those costs, then that's a cost saving potentially. So there were just my comments. I don't really have any questions. I would just finally point out that in the case of Warrington, they offered an interest rate that was below the Public Works Loan Board, 0.5% below. So if you compare it to that, that's another cost saving potentially compared to where we could alternatively locate money. So thanks again for the report, and I just wanted to make those comments.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak on this? Okay, so we had an amendment there, which, if Phil, did you get a form of words written down, or oh, sorry, Yvonne, I didn't see. Councillor Nolan.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeanette. I mean, I think that this has been a really helpful, useful report. And I think that the further guidance will help us in terms of being clear about the value of community bonds to us. And it does sound as though there's a potential for them to be, I think as Councillor Cleary just said, another weapon in the arsenal that we have for fundraising. That I said potential, not guaranteed, but I think we do need to find out and maybe to test out their potential against specific projects, whether the projects that Councillor Cleary identified or others. And I think there's definitely the potential there, and the idea that the community will directly invest in council projects which are for their benefit and the benefit of their communities is an exciting one, and I think it does build on our community wealth building strategy. But I would say that one of the important things about this is that if we are asking the community to invest in this council, then the community need to be clear that all of us are supporting this council and what it's delivering. And think that's really important, that we're seen as united. We are seen as supporting the developments of the council and not as carping and criticising continually and giving that impression, because people have to be convinced that we're a council worth investing in and that we're delivering projects that are worth investing in. And on that basis, I would certainly be happy to support those recommendations. I'm not sure about Councillor Anderson's amendment. You said at the end of the year. Am I right? Did I hear that correctly?
Well, as soon as the finance and costs have worked up and the value, and maybe we can find out what the social social returns are on that. Nobody's carping or criticising any of the work or regeneration that's going on, Councillor Nolan. I'm just conscious that in the climate we're actually in the capitalisation directive, putting extra burdens on our finance and officer team. You know, I'm not saying let's not go ahead with it, but let's find out that information before we commit to any more officer time. So you can. There's my amendment.
That was my question. I thought I heard you say a further report at the end of the year, and that was what I was questioning.
Well, further report when the officers have had the time and diligence to go through those costings and their own time. So, we're 6 months into the year now. I'll take Cher's guidance about how long that might take.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I would say quite a few of the team are due to go on annual leave imminently, so I would say it would take a couple of months to bring back, at least.
Nearly the end of the year, then. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much for that. So perhaps if you would take a friendly change to your amendment to the end of the year to as soon as available.
Happy to accept that, Chair.
Chair, if I may, there was no original proposal to be amended, so that is a single proposal, which, as I understand it, Councillor Anderson, is to agree that guidance is developed, ... and then replacing number 2 with something along the lines that before a recommendation is made to Council that community bonds be added to Treasury management as an alternative form of debt financing, a further report be brought before this committee once officers have had the opportunity to fully scope the risks and issues involved. So that is a proposal to vote upon, Chair.
I've got a seconder yet.
I understood Councillor Vendian.
Okay. Right. Okay. So are we happy to agree this by assent, everyone? Okay. Thank you. On to agenda item number 8, which is Treasury Management Annual Report. Cher, you're going to present that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I should say, Chair, this is the annual Treasury Monitoring Report for last year, 2021. Therefore, it's a retrospective report, and it's a report that we are required to produce by SIPFA, the Prudential Code. The report provides the committee with information on the national economic background during last year, specifically in relation to the impact of COVID-19 on bank rates and unemployment rates. During the year, there was also a 1% reduction to the borrowing rate for Public Works Loan Board, or PWLB, as we just referred to, from 1.8% down to 0.8%. And this is as long as local authorities were not using that funding from PWLB to purchase investment assets primarily to generate a return or a yield over the next 2 years. So that was a beneficial reduction in the interest rate to PWLB. In previous years, they had actually increased it by that 1%, so it was welcome that it was actually reduced. There was also a requirement during last year on local authorities to provide much more detailed information on their capital programme and capital expenditure, and also a confirmation from myself as Section 151 over the purpose of expenditure. And these two items really and changes are mainly in response to something that's been widely publicised in the press over the past sort of 2 years, which is in response to the large amounts of borrowing that some of local authorities have actually undertaken to purchase assets for a commercial gain. And you will have seen some of these referred to, things like shopping centres, petrol stations or hotels. And it has been recognised, I think, by the Treasury that local authorities don't have the appropriate skills or the commercial acumen to manage these types of investment. So that new guidance really from SIPFA and the Prudential Code is actually, sort of recognising the fact that this is not normal business for local authority and it's too risky. And this is why the additional information or the additional requirements have been put into the new Treasury Code. So just in terms of Wirral, the report provides information on the level of the Council's external debt at the end of last year. And this was just over 287 million. The table provides information on the debt that has matured and new borrowing that we've undertaken. And also information on loans that the Council had matured in year as well. The Council also holds other long-term liabilities, such as the PFI contract, and that's currently valued at 36.9 million. And the expiry date on that contract is it's due to be repaid in 2031, so another 10 years for that. Table 3 in the report provides information also about our investment activity that the Council holds. And again, just at the end of last year, we hold investments valued at just under 48 million. And security really remains our top priority as to whether we consider going into the investments or not. So really, we place a high amount of risk and we do determine whether we want to go into some investments in terms of the level of risk. And our risk, the security element does determine our risk appetite when actually looking at that. Council does diversify as well in its investment portfolio, and this is to balance the risk as well. And last year, as a result of the budget process, we had £1 million saving in to diversify into different types of investments, more innovative investments, which we would actually have a look at our risk appetite to see whether we would want to diversify into investments which attract a little bit more risk for a higher return. Now, unfortunately, last year with the market downturn and staff capacity being diverted to support activities on the pandemic, the saving wasn't achieved. And this, as you will know, in our outturn report, contributed to the overspend which we reported for last year, for which we received the capitalisation. Just to kind of finish with this, Chair, paragraph 3.46 refers to our environmental, social and governance, or ESG policy, which members will remember was included in our Treasury management strategy for last year as well. And in paragraph 3.48, members will note that we have fully complied with the Treasury management indicators for last year, and these are highlighted in the appendix. The recommendation for this report, Chair, is for the committee to recommend to full council that the 2021 Treasury management report be agreed. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Do you have any? Councillor Green?
Thanks, Jeanette. I wonder if Cher could just explain on page 49, 3.33, when we talk about our investments and we talk about the credit components, don't pretend to understand ratings about what they may or may not indicate, certainly not after the financial collapse of 10, 12 years ago, whenever it was. But it says 65% AAA, 2% A+, 10% A, and 23% unrated. Should I, given what you've said about lack of risk and security and so on, should I be concerned that 23% of our investment is unrated, or certainly not rated AA or A+? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Green. So I'm going to ask Pete Molyneux if he can come and talk to this for me, who's the our Treasury management expert. As I understand it, I think these unrated portfolio are things like pooled funds, so property funds that we hold.
I don't know what it is. If I put my mask on, I go deaf as well.
But I will defer to Pete if you could answer that question, please. Pete, thank you.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Green. The unrated investment is actually a cash flow facility to one of our companies. Now, the company doesn't have a rating. Most of these ratings are financial institutions who have like an official rating, but as this is a company, a council company, it's actually officially unrated. So, and then Things like, for example, building societies are not rated. So there's certain classifications of investments which are ratings, some of them have them. But in that particular example, we've got a £975,000 cash flow loan to one of our companies.
Going back to it through you, Chair, thanks for the explanation. Just picking on the assurance and risk element that you mentioned, Chair. The fact that we are providing this cash flow opportunity as an investment to one of our companies, are we still then to accept that it's a sound company we're giving this finance? If we can't rate it, how do we know it's a safe haven for the public's cash?
Chair, these are companies that have an official rating by one of the kind of financial institutions. So there's 2 or 3 organisations that rate. It's normally financial institutions that they rate. So there is no actual official rating for this company. It doesn't exist. So
I think what I'm trying to get to, Chair, is I now understand why we don't have a rating, as in building societies don't. But I think I'm after someone to say, don't worry, Jeff, it's safe as houses, it's one of our companies, and it's very well founded. Because after all, it's the public's money, isn't it? I think is what I'm after. You, I don't know who's going to give me that assurance, or maybe I'm not entitled to it. I don't know. But.
It's a cash flow facility that's existed for over 5 years, and we've recently renewed it, and it's been through members. So it's been through P&R committee before. So
if we were right in the past, we'll be right now. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Chair, can I maybe just to assure Councillor Green, I guess, in terms of that, and just picking up from Pete. So any investments that we go into, we undertake due diligence on all of the companies. We also have Treasury advisors that we pay an annual fee to as well, that we get advice from us, and they will provide us advice as to whether, especially these unrated ones, whether they are robust, and they can give us the assurance that we are entering into them. So we do enter into them, with advice and with guidance. And we have done sort of like, as much background checks as we can to make sure that they are safe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Nolan.
Just briefly, in response to Councillor Green, I suspect from Pete's comments there that the cash flow facility to a council company is something that both you and I were involved in agreeing, Councillor Green.
I'm not. Councillor Carubia.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, Chair, I wonder if you could just bear with me. I'm a bit of an idiot in finance, but why are some companies not rated at all, or what warrants them to not be rated?
Chair, the ratings are mainly for financial institutions. So the ratings in these tables, so Standard & Poor, Fitch, there's a number of organisations, they give ratings to financial investment companies and banks, etc. That's the kind of the rating we're applying here. So for example, building societies aren't rated, and a number of companies aren't rated. So we can apply to, I think companies can be applied to get a rating. There's a cost to do that. So I think you can apply to go through a process, but a lot of companies do not have the unofficial kind of credit rating in that sense for this table. This is a Treasury management report. It's come from our Treasury management advisors using the kind of the major Treasury management, the free kind of rating agency indexes that they use. So that won't cover all companies.
So, sorry, Peter, is it the case then that they're so big they don't need to be rated? Or is that not the case?
I think it's a case that they're smaller. Then obviously they're not a bank. They're not sort of a major financial house, etc. So they will have a different type of rating. So if you go, you can pay for credit agencies to give you a rating, etc. And there's a number of bodies that will have a rating. But this is a kind of Treasury management set of criteria in that table. So if you go to, there's a number of organisations like credit agencies, they would give you reports on what they think the company rating should be, etc. But that table is slightly different. That is kind of applying Standard & Poor's, Fitch, Moody's kind of ratings to a kind of set of criteria for investments.
I think what committee are just seeking is a reassurance maybe that the lack of a rating does not indicate that there's something that's unrateable about the particular company. And just added to that, I mean, I hope you can also offer an assurance that councils invest in companies that aren't rated just like we do.
Yeah, Chair. And for example, as I mentioned before, if we were to put any money into a building society, the vast majority of building societies have no rating attached to them. That's an example. And our investment that isn't rated is, as Councillor Nolan said, is something that we've discussed before at kind of shareholder board.
Councillor Cameron?
Sorry, I don't wish to prolong this. Table 3, do I understand £87.9 million was the balance in April 20 and £47.8 million is the balance on the 31st of March 21. And then the investment portfolio of credit companies at the bottom, the 23% unrated, seems to apply to April 20. I can't get it to add up to March 21 because it seems to apply to 10,450, 10,000 and 975 of the 87. I just can't see where the unrated comes into play on the 31st of March. I'm sure it does. There's, it's millions of pounds involved here and then a table at the bottom that I just can't relate.
Chair, would it be beneficial if we provided a bit more detail to members of the committee after the meeting with exactly what these are and what they're made up of and some of them, maybe the names of the organisations as well and how those totals have all made up?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Pete. Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, well, I think we will all leave here today knowing a little bit more about ratings than when we, or maybe not, than when we came in. Well, thank you for that, Pete. So I am going to propose that we accept the recommendation here. Do I have a seconder? Seconded. Can we agree by assent? Yep. Thank you, committee. We move on to the next agenda item, which is our work programme film court. You're going to speak to this. Thank you.
So, excuse me, Chair. Chair, this is simply to present this in the normal way for members' comments and to take forward throughout the committee's work for the remainder of the year.
Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. I just maybe under the other item, but it's appropriate for the work programme. We're going to be looking at a lot of disposals of assets over the next 12 months, probably, and rightly in quite a lot of cases. So, just like to request that a report be brought at officers' convenience to look at those assets and maybe develop top slice 1, 2, 3% off there to develop a community fund that could be spent back in those wards where those assets have gone from. We've seen it previous examples of Acre Lane, for example. So just for officers to bring a report on the potential of bringing a community fund on disposal of assets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yeah, we can bring that report back, no problem. Yeah.
Turn it on. No one. Councillor Green and Councillor Carubia.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, by the way. Just on the work programme, on page 67, one Wirral change programme, it says it's key. I think Mr McCall will remember and Chair, I think, I've been asking for this for quite a while and it keeps getting pushed back. And I just wonder, given on the Wirral plan paper, it says we're going to devote all the work of the project management office and the change office in developing all the stuff around the Wirral plan. Is this what is actually happening to the change programme? Is it been pushed to one side? Do you know what I mean? Certainly, it says here we're going to find out between August and October, but you know, will there still be a change programme if all the work of the change team has been devoted to the Wirral plan?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Green. So it's kind of, because of timings, we've sort of gone a bit back to front with the change programme. So what would normally happen is we would bring the Wirral plan, that would then result in a set of delivery plans, which Carly spoke about, and those delivery plans would become the change programme. So it would be the programme as how we're going to deliver the Wirral plan. And because the Wirral plan's been delayed, the intention is now that the change programme and the delivery plans will be sort of like merged together and be one programme that goes forward with how we're going to implement the Wirral plan. We have done it a bit back to front because, as you know, we're undertaking budget workshops at the moment. So the elements of the change programme with a financial, a value on it, we're actually looking at those in advance of the Wirral plan being approved by P&R and by Council, just because of timings, really. So when we bring back the delivery plans that Carly mentioned, when we have that workshop, they will eventually become the change programme. So it's a bit, we're doing things concurrently, really, but once we bring back the Wirral plan and those delivery plans, it will merge into one programme then. Yes, you will. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so no one else has indicated they want to speak. Can we agree to? Sorry, I need my glasses. Yeah, so I'm just going to move that we agree the work programme. Do I have someone to second that? Councillor No, thank you. Can we agree by assent? Yeah, okay. So is that additional then? Yeah. So I'll say, so do you want to just, again, what you said, so Councillor Anderson proposed that we also bring a report back that looks at our asset disposal and the potential to top slice a percentage off the whatever relies on those assets to go back into the
community
ward,
fund,
I imagine,
like
where the asset's based.
Or constituency, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Are members happy to agree? Thank you. So, next item on the agenda, section D, we're looking at referrals from committees. So, number 10, we have a referral from the Children, Young People and Education Committee. It's our prevention policy. Phil, you're going to speak to this one?
Chair, I'm merely introducing to explain to members why it's here, and that's because this is a cross-cutting theme that covers several committees in the way that you would expect prevention to do so. Simone White is here to present the issues at hand and answer any questions. The Chair, of course, is absent, so you may wish to go directly to Ms White.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. I'm really pleased to be here tonight to introduce this policy to you and ask for the recommendations to be taken forward, which are that the prevention policy and statement and prevention framework is approved and that the Breaking the Cycle programme for children is endorsed. This work has been done and led by an AD in Children's Services, Elizabeth Hartley, but it really is the start of a people's programme which will begin to build for how we work with people in Wirral to achieve some of the changes that we have wanted to do for some considerable time. It will enhance and support as the people's element of our regeneration programme for our borough. The preventative strategy sets out how we will provide strategic leadership, how we will take a place-based approach, how we will build on people's strengths and work with them, how we will look to provide equity for those who need that extra support, how this can be a whole system approach across children's, adults, families and citizens, and how, importantly, we can co-produce this work because engaging people in the work going forward is very much a part of strength-based and resilient working. In order to take this forward, we have set out in this a clear definition of prevention. As somebody from social care for many years, the word prevention is used quite often, and it's important that we understand what we mean by that in Wirral. And for us, prevention is building on the unique and personal strengths and resilience of children, families and adults through coordination and enabled communities to help people achieve the very best outcomes throughout their lives. Prevention is often thought of in different categories, and for us, prevention goes right across people's journeys. So the policy sets out 3 clear levels. The first level, primary level, is that help and support activities and opportunities that we deliver to all so they can support themselves and help themselves as much as possible. The second level is that targeted intervention, those specific programs that begin to work in partnership with communities and people to enable them to move things on. And last but not least, it's looking at prevention at that very strategic statutory end of services in health, in social care. We always want to make sure that people get the services they need to prevent even some of the most serious situations, be it a cancer patient or be it a child coming into care, actually getting worse. And if we can move that back, we want to. So for us, what we have done to bring those concepts alive is we've actually presented to you tonight what the children's programme is for beginning to achieve these changes. And the children's programme is called Breaking the Cycle. And within that programme, we've got 8 clear catalyst projects that we think will really help us achieve those 3 things. It starts with a programme where we're looking at supporting parents who've not been able to care for their children to be able to live better lives and to generally feel more confident and to get the support they need with trauma or housing or help that they need in order to move on. We've got programmes in there which are very much focused at some of the key issues that we know affect children's lives, and that's around domestic abuse. And we have Drive and Can We Talk About Domestic Abuse? Drive and our prevention programmes around perpetrators are really important. Many of our perpetrators, a very high proportion, do not live with their victims. And just supporting the victims and concentrating there often means that perpetrators move on to new situations. Supporting both perpetrators and victims begins to create the change. Talking about domestic abuse is actually a programme that changes the way our core staff work with victims and families. Alongside those targeted programmes, we have a place-based programme, which I know the committee has heard a little bit about already, which is our Cradle to Career programme, which is based in the Bidston and St James's area and is about all services working together to actually look at how we work alongside the community rather than just deliver services to them, to actually work across education and to change some of the ambition and focus and outcomes for people. Again, another one of those programmes targeting an area that we know very much affects children and families is the ADDA programme, which seeks to tackle some of the drug and alcohol-related issues and deaths that we know affect children and families. As well as looking at what we need to do to tackle some of the problems, we're looking at what we need to do to tackle some of the solutions. And 2 of the programmes that we have are focused on ensuring that our parents and families can access life chances through employability, to actually make sure that they are ready for work and to get out there in the community, because we know that poverty and many other life factors actually affect our families' futures. One of the main things about preventative work, and I say this as somebody in the statutory sector, is that in setting it up, it can cost a lot of money to a council to set up a programme. And often you don't know what the result of that programme will be until you've had that opportunity to set it up. What I'm very pleased to tell you about all these programmes is we've been very proactive in seeking as many additional funding sources as possible. Many of these programmes are either funded by external investments or grants, or by looking at using money in imaginative ways, but making sure they all fit in with the programme of needs that we have in Wirral. So I'm pleased to commend this to committee tonight, and I'm very happy to take any of your questions, Chair.
Thank you, Simone. I don't see any hands up. Sorry, I do. Councillor Nolan and then Councillor Robinson, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Simon. You know, I've commented on this several times before, but yet again, it would be good, I think, to express this committee's thanks to the team for the work that they've done, to Elizabeth and her team for all the work that's gone into this. It really is a very exciting strategy, and it's a very welcome recognition that very often prevention is not starting with a blank sheet. Prevention is very often stopping things getting any worse than they already are. And there's a huge amount of work that can go on there. And it absolutely is across all of the people that we work with. All of our residents should be able to benefit from this. It fits very well alongside the Wirral Plan. As you say, it's the people part of the Wirral Plan, and it's something that we will wholeheartedly support. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. And again, I'll concur with Councillor Nolan said. It's and also the funding the team's managed to bring in, which has been quite phenomenal for all these programmes. Could I just ask if I can, though, obviously on page 99 of the report, it mentions obviously that obviously sadly that a lot of people haven't received any mental health services, even though they've been referred to them. And I've noticed, unless I've missed it, I do, is within the report there doesn't seem to be preference for mental health with any of the prevention programmes or that. As I say, I may have missed it, it might be incorporated within that. And if I could also just ask, it mentions on domestic violence on pages 113 and 14, it mentions 216 families, but then it will be 125 that will take part. Is that from the areas identified? Is that why? Or is there a reason for that, with it being domestic violence? And again, thank you very much for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Starting with mental health, we know that these are two key areas. I'm working with my colleagues in adult services and in public health to look at what additional support we can put in for adults with mental health, and that's an ongoing piece of work in recognition of some of the challenges around COVID and the issues. I can, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to tell you some more about that. I can tell you a little bit more about what we're doing in children's. We've started a very large piece of work co-chaired by myself and a senior commissioner from the CCG to pull together the work around children's mental health and well-being. It's supported by public health, and it's the first time that we can recall actually the three key commissioning bodies coming together to look at what's happening around children's mental health and well-being. We've started by looking at the scoping work that's happening out there. And what we've established is we have a lot of very, very good organisations that support mental health and well-being for children, young people and families. But, and the but is that they are not well coordinated at the moment. So what happens when a young person or a child has a mental health problem is professionals will refer to a range of agencies. There isn't a single front door and there isn't a single way in, which means that as commissioners, we don't get an overview of the system in the way that we would like. We have very recently met with a range of providers of services, and we want to start a piece of work which looks at pulling all that together and creating a single front door for children's mental health and well-being services. By doing that, what that will mean is that we will then be able to organise the pathways and ensure that those children and families get to the right service in a timely way, rather than just the service that the professional happen to know about. We will also be aware whether we have 30 children all sitting on 30 different waiting lists, or whether we actually have 30 children sitting on 30 separate waiting lists. And that's really, really important for the gap analysis and ensuring that it's worked. We know from listening to professionals out there, the biggest problem is when they have a problem, they're not sure who to contact and where to send children to. And we're very much hoping this work will be the start of moving that on. I think the second bit you asked us about was actually how we're targeting it. And yes, you are right. We are looking within a specific area and we are targeting those families in that way. Again, we would be more than happy to report back on the outcomes and how these different programs have impacted. Because for us, these programs, as I say, are a preventative program. When we have evidence and it's clear that it works, we will then be able to look at further investment by moving some of our statutory work, which has hopefully benefited from some of that prevention work and that money, to funding further programs. So this is about a long-term change model for children's services to actually make sure we can get resources as close to the people who need them as possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few comments really to completely echo what Councillor Noel and Councillor Robinson said. Thank you for the strategic vision, the joined up thinking in this. It's great to see that we can all be agree this strategy, and it'd be helpful if we could have maybe quarterly updates, not formally just to members on the progress. But thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Gray.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to commend this work. There's some really, really fantastic stuff going on. It's really important work that's going on, and it's very, very impressive. And just to say that the one area that I was involved in, which is Cradle to Career in Bidston St James, it's really early days, and it's already having really quite profound impact. It's already having really life-improving effects in such a short space of time. And I think we just all need to be really, to really bear with this and support it. And it's going to be such a long-term thing. It's going to be a generational thing, but it will be absolutely revolutionary. It's a really, really good project, a whole suite of really good policies there, and I just really commend it. And I'm really, grateful that you're doing it, and thank you for reporting. It's really good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Excuse me. Yes. Again, I commend, I know we've had briefings around this facilitated by Wendy Clement, and it is impressive, even more so when you hear from councillors who are on the ground seeing the impact it's making. You'd expect officers to say how great it is, but when you actually have have members who are seeing it on the ground, the differences it's making to people's lives, and the aspirations and futures, it really is quite inspiring. The other thing I would say is it shows the dedication that your team must have, from 682,000 from Wirral's budgets to bring in the total investment of 6.5 million, is it? That's not, I know a lot of it's from various government departments and so on, but 2.6 million from the Steve Morgan Foundation, and I'm sure they don't just, drop. It's not straightforward to get cash from those organisations, but I hope we can put on record our thanks to the Steve Morgan Foundation and Shine and Right to Succeed for backing this project. And hopefully the lessons we learn here in Wirral will be taken across the country, because I would imagine this is of national importance in terms of the work that you're doing. So huge congratulations to you and your team for the work you've been doing on this.
Okay, so I'd just like to add to that as well before we move on, that I commended this at the Health and Wellbeing Board as well, Simon, and pass on our thanks to Elizabeth. I think it's universally accepted that early intervention and prevention is a much better approach than trying to deal at the crisis end when things get to that point. So, yeah, I hope you can take away from committee tonight our thanks and our gratitude for this strategy. It really ties in with our strategic vision for the council. So thank you for that. I'm going to propose that we accept, that we agree the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nolan, thank you. Can we agree by assent? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Simon. So our second referral it is from Economy, Regeneration and Development Committee, and it's Wirral Growth Company, Birkenhead Phase 1's final site development. Councillor Jones, you're going to excuse yourself from this. Bill?
Chair, if I may, two elements, simply to introduce that the reason it's coming to Policy and Resources Committee is because the value of the land that's being put forward for disposal, and of course the Council made a commitment that site development plans through the Wirral Growth Company Partnership would come here for final approval. The other is that this is a split report. The first element in public, there are papers to refer to in exempt session. There'll be a vote, formal vote at the end to confirm that they are in exempt. Of course, if members wish to discuss anything on those elements and debate them in open session, you would need to move that resolution earlier to exclude the public and press. Sally Shah is here to present the detail, Chair.
Thank you, Chair and members. Obviously, the report has been considered by the Economy, Regeneration and Development Committee, and the purpose of this report is to seek member endorsement to the formal site development plan for Phase 1 of Birkenhead Town Centre. And this will bring forward the construction of the first 2 office buildings within Birkenhead. This is the culmination of the work that has taken place over the last 2 years since the Council agreed the Wirral Growth Company partnership agreement with Muse Developments in March 2019. Members since then have seen and agreed a number of reports that have marked key milestones. For instance, the Partnership Business Plan in February 2020, which brought forward this draft site development plan for Birkenhead, and then the report covering the purchase of part of Milton Pavements, which have been cleared to provide the site for the 2 new offices. The background is set out in the report and addresses the obviously how these plans meet are a key part and meet the requirements and objectives of our Wirral plan, but are also a key part of our regeneration objectives. They will also create a new commercial district within Birkenhead and act as a catalyst for further investment into the town, and also support and kickstart a range of the projects that we have secured government funding for, both through Future High Streets Fund and the Town Deal Fund. The report itself covers the description of the proposed development and the scale and the size of the 2 offices. It also talks about the public consultation that has taken place and the fact that a hybrid planning application was submitted in on the 19th of August 2020, which included outline consent for a mix of uses for the wider master plan area, but also a detailed planning consent for the development of the office blocks with the associated primary electricity substation. The planning application has been approved by the Planning Subcommittee in April this year, and this, together with the attraction of a funder, having been secured, means that the report can come forward to committee, because those are some of the key conditions that needed to be met in order for construction to start. The report also sets out the programme as to when, if approved, this will take place. Other elements that are covered within the report are around the social value that will be generated by the development. So these are the key elements of the report, and the Policy and Resources Committee is recommended to consider the decision made by the Economy, Regeneration and Development Committee on the 26th of July and determine whether to support the recommendation that the Policy and Resources Committee approves the formal site development plan for Birkenhead Commercial District Phase 1. And I'm very happy, Chair, to take any questions.
So, thank you, Sally. Does anyone wish to speak? No. Okay. So, no questions. So we can. I'll move that we agree the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Seconded. We all happy to agree by assent? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Sally. Okay. Does someone want to go and get Councillor Jones? Okay. Thank you. Agenda item 12, minutes of the shareholder board. These are asking members to note the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 1st of July this year. I'd like to move that we approve them. Can I have a seconder? Anyone? Councillor Green, I'll take it that you've seconded that. Okay, can we agree by assent, everyone? Thank you. Agenda item 13 is minutes of the Senior Officer and Appointment Staffing Subcommittee. Again, I'm inviting members to note the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 13th of July 2021. I will move that we approve them. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can we agree by assent? Thank you, everyone. Okay. So agenda item 14 is exempt information, and we will exclude the press and public at this point. The committee needs to pass a resolution in respect of the papers associated with agenda item 11, which contains exempt information. Phil, is that where we're going on to now? Okay.
It's just a formality to sign off on those papers.
Thank you.
Just propose second.
Yep. Okay, so I will propose to have a seconder for this. Yep. Can we agree by assent? Thank you. Agenda item